Joanne looked out of the window. It was dark outside. The two lamps on the other side of the street caused a little light, but not enough for the whole road. Lately there'd been burglaries in the area. Every night before going to bed she would check to see if anyone suspicious was lurking about. The time was just before 10 p.m. Joanne yawned, took her anxiety tablets, then decided to go to bed. Tomorrow would be busy, up by 6:30 a.m. at the latest. Her daughter Amy was coming back from her school trip from Italy. The plane was landing at Stansted around 7:15 in the morning. Her brain was fuzzy through tiredness. Joanne stood up to head upstairs, when she noticed a light shine through the window for only a second. What the hell was that? She crouched down behind the windowsill, then looked through the glass. There wasn't a soul out there. Her mind was playing tricks, unless it was car headlights she'd seen. Not taking any chances, Joanne stayed where she was, keeping a watchful eye. With what had happened lately, everyone was on edge. From the clock on the wall it read 10:10 p.m. Joanne stood up and headed to the entrance to check it was locked, then to the bedroom upstairs. Once she'd changed into her pajamas, Joanne set the alarm clock so she wouldn't be late getting up. She got into bed, the thick quilt covered her and kept her warm. Joanne closed her eyes. She tried to relax, pushing any bad thoughts out of her mind. Sometime later and the woman was still awake. Her daughter was counting on her. Please, please, I need to get to sleep. A knock from downstairs made her jump out of her skin. Where did it come from? Was it something that had fallen on the floor? Was it someone knocking on the door? It was too late for that, surely. Joanne needed to check it out. Her dressing gown was draped over a nearby chair. She reluctantly got out of her nice warm bed and put it on, then her slippers. At the entrance Joanne stopped and looked down the hall to the top of the stairs. Slowly the woman walked to the stairs, then peered down. Maybe it was her imagination, like the light Joanne thought she saw before heading to bed. Being cautious she walked down the stairs. Halfway down Joanne stopped. If someone was in the house, how would she defend herself? She had no weapon. Joanne proceeded down the remaining steps. At the bottom she looked towards the front door and with horror observed a tall shadow on the other side. The woman placed a hand over her mouth, utterly petrified. Who was that? Suddenly Joanne saw a shadow in the living room as it vanished from view. She screamed. When she had composed herself and realized the figure at the door had disappeared, the woman crept to the doorway of the living room, then looked in. No one was there. Being the only entrance in and out, she found this very puzzling, because she swore someone was there less than a minute ago. Unless Joanne was losing her mind? Just to be sure she switched the ceiling light on. It was the way she'd left it. Everything was in its place, undisturbed. It still didn't explain the fact that someone had been standing at the front door. Should Joanne ring the police, or was she just being paranoid? Whoever it was had gone. If she rang the police, they'd want a statement and this would take time. Was it worth the hassle? The door was locked, so the chance of someone entering the premises was unlikely. The best thing to do in the circumstances was to head to bed and hopefully get some shut-eye. The time was just before midnight. In one cupboard in the kitchen was some sleeping pills. Joanne didn't like to mix the anxiety and sleeping pills together, but tonight was a special case. She felt tense. And the woman was desperate to get some sleep. Once Amy was home, she would feel more relaxed. Not seeing Amy for the last 2 weeks had hit her hard. Joanne was so used to her being there. The woman proceeded to the kitchen and opened the door to where the pills were kept. Helping herself to a glass of water, Joanne swallowed one, then proceeded back upstairs, not even checking the front door in case the person had returned. In the hallway, Joanne felt a chill coming from her daughter's room. She entered. A photo of the two of them had fallen from the bedside cabinet to the floor. Miraculously, it was still in one piece. Joanne picked it up, and it felt ice cold on her fingers. She put it back carefully. This is when Joanne thought back to something Amy had said years ago when she was only a child. How her bedroom was the safest place in the world, and if the little girl ever felt scared, she would think back to it. Joanne laughed. Such a sweet thing to say. "Night, night, sweet Amy," she said, blowing a kiss to the empty bed. Tiredness consumed her. It was time to get her head down. The tablet must have been working, as she had trouble taking her dressing gown off and placing it on the chair. She removed the slippers with difficulty, then crawled into bed. Moments later, Joanne was fast asleep. The dream she'd had was awful. A terrible crash followed by an explosion. People were screaming. Blood was everywhere. The woman awoke to the sound of someone crying out from down the hall. The time was 6:10 a.m. Joanne switched the lamp light on, utterly freaked out. What the hell was going on? The cries persisted. She got out of bed. Who was in the house? She put on her dressing gown because it was chilly, then made her way down the hall to where the cries had come from, even though in the last few moments they'd ceased. With horror, the light was on in Amy's bedroom. Cautiously she entered. Her daughter sat on the end of the bed. Her eyes closed like she was asleep. She wore clothes Joanne didn't recognize. What was going on? She neared her 15-year-old child. Softly she placed her hands on the girl's shoulders to wake her up. Joanne shook her a little, with no response. She shook her harder. Amy opened her eyes. Shock covered the girl's face. Straight away she saw her mother stood there. "Mum, how come I can see you?" she said, a scared look on her face. Joanne noticed Amy was a little transparent, like a ghost. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. I just found you in your room." "What's wrong, Amy?" she asked. The girl grabbed her mother's arms, then answered, "I think there's a problem with the plane. There's a bad storm outside, and the pilot has just warned us to stay in our seats. Mum, I'm terrified. What should I do?" This was a mother's worst nightmare. Be brave for me, Amy. I promise you will get through this. Tell me what you see. The girl looked petrified. She shook through fear. Some passengers are out of their seats arguing with the cabin crew. Most are strapped in the same as me. Please, Mom, what should I do? She cried out. Joanne was terrified for her, but thankful she was there to help. Make sure you're strapped in tight, sweetheart. Place your head in between your legs and close your eyes. She then watched Amy do this. The girl shook a little, causing the bed to shake. Will I ever see you again, Mom? I'm so scared of what will happen. Please hold my hand, Mom, she said. Joanne took her hand, very emotional. I love you, Amy. Amy opened her eyes, then removed a small pink box from her coat pocket and placed it on the bed. I want you to have this, Mom, in case I don't survive this. I bought it for you for your birthday. Suddenly her daughter vanished. The woman sobbed for her, utterly inconsolable. She awoke and remembered the awful dream. The time was 6:30 a.m. She turned the alarm off. Joanne rushed to Amy's room. No one was there. With a shock, she saw a little pink box sitting on the end of the bed. She opened it. Inside was a silver ring with a small note that read, "You're the best mom in the world. Happy birthday, love from Amy." From downstairs the phone rang. Joanne ran down the stairs and into the living room. Picking it up, she said out of breath, "Hello, how can I help you?" Deep down she knew what it was about. A man's voice answered from the other end. "I have some distressing news, I'm afraid." "Are you Joanne Woodward?" "Yes," she answered. "The plane which your daughter was on has crashed. If you..." Joanne realized what was coming next and interrupted him. "Yes, I know. My daughter's dead, isn't she?" Her heart was broken. For a few seconds there was silence, then the person said, "The good news is your daughter's safe. The ambulance is taking her to hospital with minor injuries. When they pulled her from the wreckage she kept saying that you was there with her, holding her hand the whole time. I should imagine the shock of what had happened caused her to hallucinate." Joanne cried with utter relief, then realized miracles did happen.